Nice. Fantastic. All right, so let's do the proper intro. So, brothers and sisters in humanity, welcome wherever you are, whenever you are listening to this. It is a privilege and an honor to be with you. And in terms of privilege and honor, it is a privilege and honor to be joined by this evening's guest. He is my brother. He is my friend. He is my mentor. He is the one and only Mr. Harry Price. And we're going to get into what Harry is doing in the world in just a moment. But I want to give you guys a sense of the show that we're having this evening. This is part one of a 4-part investigation called Decoding Drive. And it sparked from a mutual friend of mine and Harry's, a guy by the name of Jimmy Davis, an outstanding artist who goes by the stage name of Tapes. And we were having a catch up and it just came about. We were like, what is that essence of drive? Why do some people have it and why do some people not? And, what gives rise to drive in some people? And I was like, my God, I am fascinated by this. There are times when I've got more drive than anyone I know. And there are times when I am the laziest person I know. So, for me, if I can understand some of these elements, I feel like I can be a better human and I can be of greater service. So Harry, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much indeed for having me, and it's great to be here, and welcome and hello to everybody as well.
So how has drive shaped your life? And you can take that in any direction you want. So I kind of leave it deliberately open.
Okay. How has drive shaped my life? That is an open-ended question, George. That could take so many different parts. I would say that drive has been a huge part of my everyday life from a very, very young age. And I think it initially became apparent that I had a bit of drive through my passion of sport from growing up. And anyone out there that has 2 older brothers and loves sport probably knows that you have to have a little bit of drive if you want to try and win at anything, succeed at anything. And I think that's where the initial drive in my life came from. I just wanted to try and beat my brothers at sports. It was usually myself and my dad versus my 2 older brothers. My younger sister was the nurse on the side of the pitch, so she would look after us when we collapsed in a heap from anything else. So yeah, my drive initially, I think, came from a passion with sport. And certainly after I had an injury and was unable to play for a while and had to explore some other avenues, when I moved into more of a business side of things, from working for employers to then now sort of setting up our own businesses. Drive has obviously taken a slightly different form and a slightly different meaning to us, but I think it's something that's definitely ingrained in some people naturally from a very young age, and in other situations it can come into your life a little bit later for different reasons and other different means. So it's great to have drive. I think it's hugely important to have drive, and I think that helps give people a passion and a purpose in life and sets them off in a direction. And without drive, you do possibly find yourself in a bit of a rudderless situation where you aren't quite sure where to go.
So I've written down three words beginning with S that I think may have some part to play in encoding drive in the DNA of people, right? And you've touched on one there. I've written down the word siblings. I don't know if you've had a chance to see The Last Dance at all on Netflix. And so I was touched by Michael Jordan's story of he was constantly trying to beat his brother Larry, I think it was. And that was and he was saying you just have to go again, right? Every time he was trying to beat his brother. And you actually came to mind there, because I remember you telling me some of the stories of, the rugby games you'd play with your brothers. And, you're a big guy now, but back then it must have been terrifying taking on James and Joss and stuff. So
fantastic training.
Tell us a bit more about those early years for you. What did those games look like? Because I also have a sense that possibly drive gets encoded through, you said, a love of sport. So I feel like there's a desire to achieve something. So for you talked about beating your siblings, but also there was this love of sport present. So tell us about those kind of formative years of sport for you.
So we grew up really in the middle of nowhere in Cornwall. Very proud Cornishman, have to get that in there, George. In the middle of nowhere. So we had a big garden. Dad bought some surrounding area from a local farmer. So we had a big garden. I think it was about 2 acres of land, and we had sectioned off really for pitches that we used for everything. So very lucky that Dad loves sport. My brothers all love sport. So we would have, for example, a little section of patio, which we used for 1v1 basketball and 2v2 basketball. That got quite heated at times, obviously in a nice way, but that was certainly competitive. We used to play American football 2v2. So
wow.
To call the line of scrimmage. So as soon as the ball was snapped, there'd be a couple of seconds and then it was a free for all. You could cross the line of scrimmage and it was usually 2-hand touch. We used to play games of 1v1 and 2v2 football. We used to have, we built a cricket net out of scaffolding and fishing line. So that used to be competitive. We had a game where you had to kick the ball from any ball from one end to the other. And wherever you caught it was where you almost marked it, like in Australian rules football.
Yep.
And it was relentless. It was every day, 7 days a week, before school, after school, and just loved it. Absolutely loved it. And we'd have to be dragged in to go and eat dinner and sort of go to bed. So definitely some really happy memories doing that. And I think it definitely does put a natural drive in you to win. If you're competing with, like Michael Jordan said in that fantastic documentary, if you're really competing against your brothers and you want to win, and usually I lost because I was smaller and less life experience physically. I wasn't as big as them, and it just gives you that natural drive, which is important, definitely, I think, in your life.
Nice. And I guess that it's even like, because so for me, my equivalent of kind of a bigger brother figure was we again, like we had quite a kind of, we had like a small holding which had outbuildings and various bits.
Yeah.
And so I was about 5 or 6 when we got this house, and my parents employed a young guy called Johnny who he's like 19 at that age, at that time, and he had ended up like ridiculously talented cricketer. He played for Worcestershire Seconds and everything, and again, drive was a big thing in his life. Actually, his father perhaps drove him too much, and he decided that it wasn't for him, because he was like, he didn't want to be living his father's kind of dream, if that made sense. But he was insanely talented. So for me, yeah, we set up a cricket net in the garden. I would be bowling, and like any nick or any full shot, that was a small victory. I knew the chance of me getting him out was so slim, like you. The chance of your winning because you were small and stuff was slim, but any little kind of small victory, I was like, yes, and it was like, can I string a few of those small victories together? So yeah, like you, like people always comment on how competitive I am. I feel like it's chilled out a bit these days, but I remember that there were times when if I didn't get a chance to say bowl at my dad in some kind of like village game or like play alongside, I would be like floods of tears. Like I was so wanting to do well. So that brings me to another word that I want to explore. And I wonder, and we hear it in the story of Johnny there, perhaps it was in the wrong form. And I feel like perhaps you got it in the right form, which is the word support. Like, what role do we feel support? And by the way, if you guys are watching this, wherever you're watching, please pop in the comments, like, let us know your thoughts on this whole topic, because I have opened this investigation being very kind of like, I don't know where this is going to go. I've got a few ideas about what drive may look like and what may seed it in people, but I'm really open to kind of being educated here. So if you've got any comments, any thoughts, do let us know. So the support that you had, like your dad was there playing with you, so he was like your teammate, right? So that seems pretty key. And you've got this space where you can play, and you've got these different areas. What was that support like? Did you ever feel like you kind of were driven too hard in the case of my friend Johnny, or do you feel like you got the right amount of kind of push and autonomy, kind of given autonomy?
I was given total autonomy. Extremely fortunate.
Okay.
It was a case of, we love playing sport, all of us. We couldn't get enough of it, and never once did I ever feel that mum, dad, brothers, whoever forced me into doing anything, ever. And there were times when I left the Cornwall cricket team because I just didn't enjoy it anymore. I didn't like training on Sundays. There were sports that I did stop playing completely. And every single time that I felt like I wanted to change a sport, not do a sport, put more time into a sport, I was always supported, and never once felt like I was pushed into it. There were times when I was perhaps being a bit grumpy or a bit moody about things, and you do need a steer to say, come on, get yourself together. But never once did I feel that I was ever pushed into it. And I think that you have to, at a young age, explore as many different sporting opportunities as you can, or as many different activities as you can. It doesn't have to just be sport, to find what makes you spark. And along the way, as you do get older, you do find that things do fall away. But there's people saying that you should specialize at quite a young age in sport. I think that you should play, my personal view is you should play a range of sports, get hand-eye coordination going, different environments. You know, Jordan talks about how he had a love for baseball and how that taught him many things. He could change his hand to it, helped his basketball. So I think that you do need supportive people around you, definitely in anything, not just in sport, to give you drive and to give you steer. And you need to seek counsel from the right people who have your best interests at heart. And yeah, the sporting element of it, I think, was a great way to help focus my drive, which was an inner desire to win or to do well.
Okay, nice. So yeah, that word spark there is an interesting one. I wonder whether that is for some people, for you it feels like growing up, your drive was growing up with you through this desire to beat your brothers, basically. And yet I see that there are other people sometimes who they'll suddenly get this idea for a business project and they'll just throw themselves into it. And maybe previous to that, they've not really, like you said, they've been a bit rudderless perhaps. So I guess I wonder that. We'll come back to that. I want to pick up on this point you said about playing lots of sports. There's a great book. I don't know if I've recommended it to you. And I hope definitely throughout this conversation, we'll throw out a few bits of books or content, video that have inspired us, because I'd really love for this to be a resource for people. Book called Match. Not called Match. It's called Range by David Epstein. And he begins it by contrasting two of the greatest sportsmen who have ever lived, Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Talking about how Tiger Woods specialized from age 2. He was there on the driving range, and you've got the videos of his dad took of him at age 2. Roger Federer didn't really decide he wanted to play tennis until he was about 14 or 15, apparently. Like, he played it, but he didn't decide to specialize. He played almost every other sport going alongside it. And we know, like, A.B. de Villiers, one of the best batsmen who's ever done it, particularly in the one-day arena, was South Africa hockey, South Africa tennis. He was playing all of these kind of county and state and national level sports as well for his country. So in your particular field, and we're going to come on to this soon, you have set up what is now the world's largest football trials company. You have seen probably more aspiring footballers than possibly anyone on the planet. I don't know. I'd love your thoughts on that, right? But it's got to be getting close. So what is your guidance to parents for those who kind of want to pursue the game of football, particularly, say, for those who are like 10, 11, 12, who are still at the start of their journey?
I would say that the book by Matthew Syed called Bounce, where he talks about the 10,000 hour rule, is probably a good baseline and a good place to start. If someone's driven towards a particular sport, like you say, there are examples. Other ones would be Gary Neville, who was a fantastic cricketer as well. You had playing gigs, I think, and you had Sam Warburton in rugby, who played different sports, could have done football or rugby. Greg Norman at golf, I think, only started at 15, 16. So there is many examples where that happens. But I think with football, we've just interviewed one of our players who is now a Premier League academy scholar. So he's now at 16 years old, turning 17, pushing on to try and get a Premier League first team contract. And James, my brother, who's the other co-founder of the business, he did the interview with him. And we've learned that by the age of 10, he had already done 10,000 hours of training.
Wow. Which
was a huge eye-opener. This was this week. And I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday that James did the interview with him. And that kind of blew my mind, that by that young age, he had specialized so young and put in so many hours of hard work that he was already at that level where Matthew Syed says, based on his science, he thinks that people are at a certain level.
Yep.
I would say, definitely in football, there is no shortcut. I think that you have to have a certain technical ability which cannot just be acquired in a short space of time. I do believe, personally, I'm not a football coach and I'm not a football scout. We look after the business, but we surround ourselves with world-class experts. And from what I understand from these people is that you do have to put in thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of grueling hard work in football particularly at a young age when you're physically developing, your brain is rewiring everything, you go through growth spurts. I don't think in football there is a shortcut away from hard work and practice. And I think there are different people that have different natural abilities, different natural talent, but certainly there are some things that you do absolutely have to have certain skills that you must master in order to get through the academy system or to get your first sort of pro contract. Sure.
Yeah, nice. So one of the other words I've written down is struggle. And I think you might have told me this story of like Luis Suarez. Did he begin like playing with an orange, like doing keepy uppies with an orange to kind of almost like busking to get some food for his family? Or
Alexis Sanchez.
Alexis Sanchez, right? So I knew it was one of the South American guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there something? And I'd love to kind of get your take on this from, you've seen a good number of footballers now. In terms of the ones who, in your eyes, have the best chance of making it, who seem to have that drive in place, that means they're going to put the hours in. Is there a disproportionate number who appear to have had some struggle element, or is it not that simple? What's your take on that?
I think it comes down to what your why is as well. So the book, Matthew Side, you can move on to that side of it. Simon Sinek, where he talks about start with why. For those sorts of players, so Luka Modric, war zone, you had, as you say, Alexis Sanchez doing cartwheels on the street from the age of 6 to put food on the table. These Mo Salah's story is unbelievable. He had to catch buses like 6 hours to go and do 2 hours of training, 6 hours back, do his homework. He was doing that 5 days a week. There are certainly players out there who have had unbelievable hard times, come up in really difficult environments and circumstances, had tough starts in life, who have probably been so desperate to provide and to create a sort of wealthy lifestyle or to protect and look after people that they've been forced into becoming amazing at football, perhaps, which they also loved. But I think there are some that you don't have to have a sob story to be good at something. There are people that have had great backgrounds. Frank Lampard, for example, went to one of the top private schools in the country, and obviously he's flourished. So I don't think it necessarily defines how far you're going to go, but there is a strength in having a strong need or desire to have to succeed, which I think some of these players do have. But again, I think it all comes down to your passion and how much effort you put into it.
Yes, it's almost like the struggle could be an inciting factor, like an external factor that gives you that motivation, that gives you that why.
Yeah,
it can also be something intrinsic, like for yourself, that was developed, through a family kind of situation. And I was pondering about the story of like David Beckham. And if I remember rightly, he used to go down to the park with his dad almost every night and just be pinging the free kicks, and his dad would be there throwing the balls back. So I was wondering, because like from what I read, it didn't seem like they were particularly hard up. They didn't seem super wealthy, but they, it seemed like they were okay, right? So we can't say that kind of he was Alexis Sanchez or Luka Modric kind of struggle levels, right? But what I was wondering was whether there's something about the kind of that love of the game getting sparked, that love of practice, the kind of the 10,000 hours thing. So whether Beckham's story, and it's probably loads of others, maybe in your own as well, it began maybe as a chance to connect with their dad or their mum, whoever might be taking them to the park. And at that point, it wasn't thinking, I'm going to be going pro. I'm just loving connecting and getting some great attention and one-to-one time with my mum or my dad. And I from my own, journey with my son, particularly at the moment, starting to see how important that one-to-one time with him is. And so I wondered whether it began with just connection with the primary caregiver. Like I love spending time with my dad or my mum, right? But then the kind of journey goes, oh, look, that free kick's getting a bit closer to the goal every time. And the more it happens, the more they fall in love with practice. And of course, from Matthew Syed, from Dr. Anders Ericsson, Malcolm Gladwell, all these guys who've looked at this, it's that love of practice that seems to be the defining factor, along with the drive to do it, that will see whether someone's going to kind of hit that top level. So I wonder what your thoughts is there. Is it like, for you, you had this love of sport, but was there something about you get to be on your dad's team? Was there any element of that you kind of was a part of the love that was being sparked in you?
Yes, definitely. I think I don't know who said the phrase or the quote, but they said the key to fulfillment is progress. So if you are in a situation where you are connecting with a family member or a best friend, it could be that you're loving it because it's escaping. Maybe you're having a tough time. Oh, your home environment isn't great, and so football is your escape.
Yeah, yeah.
It could be that, yeah, that you are connecting with your dad that you get on really well with. So I think what you're talking about there really totally depends on the environment that you're in, your why. Um, yeah, so I'd say I think all those sort of elements come together. That makes sense. Terribly badly answered that.
Well, no,
I think if you're practicing something and you're getting better at it,
yeah,
you want to do it more often. So it's in the same way you teach the habit system with repo. You know, repetition, it becomes easier, and you get pleasure from it because you're doing it and you do it more often. I think that's the case with your practice, but there has to be ultimately, if you want to get good at something, you've got to love doing it, because you're not going to, if you don't love doing something, like you don't love your business, if you haven't got a strong enough why, if you haven't got a natural drive, you're not getting better at something, then I don't think it will push you through the tough times. Right. So I don't think you'll want to go out and train when it's cold, wet and windy, but people like Beckham did go out and practice. And those great players do. They practice against walls, they practice against the curbs, they chucked, a few jumpers down for goalposts and practiced in any park. So I think, yes, there are certainly some people that associate their development with a connection with somebody. Either it was an escape from a certain situation, and it's also a mix of absolutely loving what you're practicing.
Yeah, nice. So nice. So it feels like we're starting to get like no one of these elements is guaranteed to be a source of that drive, but we can see that any one of them, and particularly when you maybe layer them up, we start to have a recipe of some of the elements that could be responsible for drive. Because I just, for all that we know, you and I have studied this stuff, and you've seen it in the footballers, like this guy who James interviewed the other day. He put his 10,000 hours in. It seems like you could argue that the genetics come into it for something like maybe 100-meter running, right? But for, say, sports like football, there is so much more nurture than nature in it, right? There's so much more that you can train yourself to be good enough versus you're just born with it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So let's start to let's use that struggle idea to shift into what you're up to now, because you mentioned it at the start of the program there with your own sports, where you actually, because of an injury, had to stop. And so I guess I'm curious to know, for you, you had some tough times there, right? And there are other players maybe who, they're sitting there with an injury. In that Michael Jordan documentary, he said it was an absolute nightmare for him being sat there for however many games, like 60 games or something on the sidelines, when he'd never missed a game before. So how did you approach that, that almost like watershed moment in your life where this thing that had been such a part of your formative years was taken from you?
I think it was a tough time. I think when you're young as well, you can't handle your emotions very well, or you're not very mature. And at the age of 14, I think I dislocated my shoulder 15 times and was pretty much told that I wasn't able to be an athlete, which was my dream. When I was younger, I did want to be a professional athlete at something. Whether I was good enough, hey, that's up for debate. Definitely wouldn't have been a footballer, I can assure you.
Well, I can confirm that, having played five-a-side with you, but that's for another day.
It was terrible, wasn't it? Absolutely awful, yeah. Not a great diver, sliding tackle, apart from that. But I think when I was younger and I had that injury, it was a case of, it's very sad, and it was a recurring thing, so there wasn't a huge amount I could do about it. And I think it just gets to the point where you say, okay, well, yes, that is the reality of it, and now let's focus on what you can do. So, in the same way, when a sportsman gets injured, any athlete at the moment, they don't just sit around moping. They focus on what they can do. What is it that I can do? Yeah, I've hurt my leg. I've hurt my. And the physios are straight in and telling them what they need to be doing, how they need to change their diet. So at 14, when I stopped playing rugby, football, and a few other things, because my shoulder just was just popping out all the time, I decided to move into. I started learning the guitar. I then started doing more bodyboarding. Which sort of the wetsuit sort of held my arm in place a bit better. It was like a natural support. And I actually moved into a slightly new set of friends as well. And just thought, well, I'll give it a couple of years of rest, and when it feels right, I'll go back. So yeah, whilst it was difficult at the time, I think I just focused on what I could do instead. And I just had to get on with it. There's nothing you can. I'm not the only one. There's millions every day that get told, that even go on to become a pro and then have a career-ending injury that we don't hear about. So I was very young when I was kind of knew it wasn't going to happen for me. But at the time, it's like the end of the world. But we do.
So I love that piece of like focusing on what you can do, because I've just started this new role at Falmouth University, and a big part of that is supporting our graduating students to take their first steps towards some form of career.
Yeah.
And with everything that's happened with this COVID, rightly people are like, what's going to happen? And there's some real fear. And my message has been, so it's really interesting to hear that this was your perspective as well, has been, listen, yes, like things are unprecedented, and we don't know what it's going to look like when we come out the other side. We can look at some facts and figures and stats and probably make ourselves even more fearful, right? Or and this has been my message. So as we shift into now talking about the business that you've built, and your journey there, I'd love to get your take on this. Is my message to them has been, don't necessarily focus on what's wrong. Can you focus on where you can add value, where you can be useful? Because that is something that's in your control. And for yourself, you couldn't control, whether your shoulder was going to pop out anymore. Like, that sounds like that was the factor that you couldn't control, but you took action towards what you could control. So if you were sat face to face with some of my students now, as we've sort of begun discussing this, is there anything else you'd add to that kind of like, right, take action where you can, like be useful, and that is something you can focus on?
I would say that none of them are masters of their brief in anything they want to do. That would be my message to them.
Right.
I would say that they have to have a clear, my personal view, if I was going to speak to them, would be that if they were sitting in that situation and they knew what sorts of roles they wanted to apply for, what career path they wanted to take, what business they want to start up, I can guarantee that none of those people know everything about their trade or their business or their employment roles and responsibilities.
Yep.
So my absolute best advice for them would be to focus on mastering and learning everything and as many skill sets as possible, to be as flexible as you can, to be able to adapt in any situation, to improve your range of courses, of qualifications, of knowledge, to make you almost a dead cert for a role. Right. So whilst we have all this time when a lot of people are sitting around, some people I think during this time have needed the rest, have needed the recuperation, have needed some thinking time. It's certainly been an up and down journey for myself and many others that I've spoken to. For the students that are potentially now trying to head out into the world and get a job, well, they need to make themselves absolutely incredible employees if that's what they want to do, if they want to go into a job. So find out what job they want to do, find out what business they want to start, and then just master it. Learn as much as you can. Read as many books as you can. Watch as many YouTube videos as you can. Find out who your idol is, who's the best in the world at whatever you want to do. Read their book, because ultimately you have to study the greatest people on the planet at a certain topic if you love it. And when you read these books, when you speak, if you're lucky enough to speak to them in person, and they tell you the stories, it's just absolutely fascinating, and you always can learn. No one is ever a master. And so I would just say seek knowledge and practice stuff. Salespeople, get on the phone, practice role plays, read all the sales books. IT people, practice your coding, try and get quicker. Set up some websites, find out what your employee is doing, so that you'd work for free for 6 months. Loads and loads of stuff. And that's the one thing that I think some people forget, is that if you want your ideal job, my advice would be to go and say that you'll go and work for them for free for 6 months. If we're in desperate situations, if you can move back in with a family member, if you've got the financial means to do that, don't go out, don't go drinking, don't see your mates, shut yourself away for 6 months and go and work that dream role for free for 6 months, get the experience, and say at the end of it, if you think I'm good enough, give me a job. And if you don't get the job, you've got 6 months of fantastic work experience and get a reference, which will help you get something else. But I just think, just sitting around doing nothing and moping doesn't get you anywhere, as hard as it is for everybody.
Absolutely. And that's things like, what I'd love to know now is, like, from that point, so what was your journey there? Like, and I know that you say this stuff because you've actually you've lived it. So, you know, maybe from your kind of university, can you give us the kind of trajectory that, you know, you left university and you know, up until the point where perhaps your brother James calls you and says, I've got this idea that I've just noticed something, right? So we'll come to that moment. But what were some of the kind of key points along that journey, almost in the context of what you've just been saying there, like learning different elements of your craft and doing what you can to get the role you want?
Yeah, so I wasn't ready to start a business. I think everyone needs to understand as well that on your own, everyone's on their own journey. There's no specific right or wrong way of doing things. There's no set pathway or pattern. And for me, having left uni, I thought I was going to be a marine conservationist, having spent a year in Sri Lanka living in a mud hut and Greece living in a tent saving sea turtles. I thought, yeah, I want to be a marine conservationist. And then after that 9 months, I realized I wasn't going to do that. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do long term, apart from start a sports business at some stage. Not sure which sport, who with, I didn't know, but I just knew that that was my longer term goal. But I think you also have to just appreciate that I didn't have all the skills and I didn't have the right sort of base to work from. So I went off and worked at a school, international school, and taught sport to international students. Did that during my summers and then for a year afterwards. Then I moved into health club sales. So I worked, my brother James, actually, I worked with him then. He was the general manager, and we basically had the most successful health club opening in the industry's history. I think we sold 5,000 memberships in only a few months. It was absolutely amazing. So you learn a lot from that. And from there, I moved into Bournemouth and moved into recruitment. And so I worked in environmental recruitment for a market leader there, which was great. And I was going to go off to Australia, and then decided I didn't want to go to Australia, and ended up working on a mega yacht in the industry for about 18 months. So working for a billionaire on a busy charter yacht, and came back, and then I set up a business called Mega Yacht Events, which was the biggest disaster ever. Like the worst business probably that's ever existed. I set up with a massive ego. For totally the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
In a big shot, or felt like a big shot on a boat, I was surrounded by all these people. And that was probably one of the best things I could have done, actually, was set a business up that was just so bad. I just learned so much from it. And then I moved and worked for a finance company in Bournemouth under a fantastic CEO who was a great person, still friends with him now. And again, that was when I got the call from James, but that was probably about a 6 or 8 year period.
Right.
So every 2 or 3 years I moved jobs.
And in that 8 years and those kind of 2 or 3 year periods between jobs, was there a conscious thing of, right, let me learn this skill now and go and seek it out? Or was it like, here's a role, well, actually, you know, this could be an opportunity for me to learn this now that I've discovered it's available? Was it kind of a chicken and egg thing, or?
I moved, sounds terrible. I moved usually because I didn't like an area or the job had got stale. I got quite bored after two or 3 years. I usually got a bit bored in the job and wanted a new challenge. Moving from Kent to Bournemouth was because I wanted to go and go where I had a load of friends. So I actually applied to the environmental recruitment company that I worked for them to find me a job. And then the MD called me up the following day and said, I'd like to interview you for you to come and work for us. So I hadn't even thought about recruitment, but he saw my CV. Right. And actually, your skill set in sales would work in recruitment. So I drove down the next day and about a week later for a second and third interview, and then moved my life to Bournemouth. And so I stayed there. So there wasn't really, I was doing this to tick off boxes to start a business.
Right.
Just sort of went with the flow. I didn't really have a set sort of clear vision in my mind. I think until you kind of know exactly what you want to do, you're kind of just going with the flow is a good thing and just trust that it's going to work out. I always believe there's something slightly bigger than ourselves watching out for us. And I think in my 20s, I wanted to experience as much as I could and work hard. Yes, always work hard, but not be tied into anything too sort of. At that stage, I definitely wasn't ready to start a business. Yeah. So, but all the jobs, you certainly learn a lot from working for other people, and you should, in my opinion, make notes or journal what people do well, what people don't do so well, the great practices in companies, the things that you would do differently. And I had a bit of a habit of, I still have a bit of a habit now, wherever I go, I always think if this was my business, so whether it be a bar or a restaurant, holiday. I was thinking, if this was my business, what's good and what would I do differently?
Yeah.
And I make mental notes, and I've done that with all old staff and bosses and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I can confirm that there's been a few times we've been maybe like in a cafe or something on the road, and you and I are just like, what is this place doing? And I can see it driving you insane when you see like the ordering system has got about 17 bottlenecks in it, and you're just like it's that's definitely.
It's good fun because you just keep it in your head, but I can tell you what I'm thinking sometimes.
And it's a really important point. So there's a couple of bits I want to pick up on in this kind of context of drive, which is like, it really lands for me when I hear you say that, your advice, one of the bits of advice you would give to the students if you were to speak to them is, you probably are not the masters of your craft yet. And, you almost knew that you weren't ready to start up a business yet at that point. But you had this kind of intention or this kind of guiding light of, at some point, I would love a sports business. And it wasn't like you were holding tight to it, like, I've got to do it in this way. And the more I've learned about how this kind of quote unquote world works, the more I see you actually you tapped into some little magic formula there, perhaps without knowing it, which is that there are two types of intention. You can have a forced intention where you're like, on this day, at this time, I am going to be doing this thing, right? And that's what we call forced intent. And I learned this from a guy we both know, Christoph. And then he talks about the other way you can do it is you can have a kind of surrendered intent where you say, this is what I would love to create. And you hold that vision in your mind, but you actually allow the how to kind of unfold for itself. And I really find myself in that space now. And hearing you say you weren't ready to start a business, within about 5 months of working with you when I first landed in Cornwall, if I was really honest with myself, even though I tried to delude myself, I actually came face to face with that truth as well. That for all that I'd read the books and seen the big speakers speaking on the stage who were successful business people, and therefore thought I knew what it took, seeing you day to day, I was like, okay, like I'm not there yet. And the beautiful thing is, like, I really feel like that stage in my life is perhaps getting very near, but I'm like that surrendered intention. I know at some point I would love to have a business that makes a big impact and does amazing things, and I know it's coming. And so I'm holding it gently, absolutely loving my time at Falmouth because I get to serve young people who are, that's a massive thing for both of us. So I'm there, like, in the same way you get to see like these young players who are like, oh my God, get a chance to perform in front of these scouts. I'm there with like these guys, they come up on a webinar with me and they're like, oh, like absolute sponges for some of the stuff that you and I have been reading and studying. And it's just, so I really appreciate you bringing that point home for us, which is that to actually be humble enough to say, actually, I'm not there yet. And that's totally okay. And it feels like that can be part of the drive, is to go, okay, cool, I'm not there yet. Now let me, go and do what I need to do to get there, right? So I wonder if you could say a bit more about this. You had this intention to start a sports company, because I wonder whether having that kind of ultimate aim, that why, is a really key part of it. And we've spoken a bit about it earlier, but so was that something? How conscious of that dream were you throughout this journey?
Very conscious when I realised I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. I think.
Right.
I think it's, like you say, the way I've always thought about it is that we're now in Cornwall and I'm driving to Scotland. It's night time, and I know that Scotland is the end destination, which would have been starting the sports business. And yep. I was stuck in Cornwall, and you can drive at night, and the lights only allow you to see the next 50 to 100 yards of your journey. The destination's there, you just can't see the whole picture. And for some people to start a business, it could be at 16, 17, 18 years old, and you do get these people that pop up and they're just absolutely ready for some reason, or they've just got perfect situation, whatever it may be. Luck as well comes into it. There's others that at 65 will be, do you know what, I've spent my whole life doing X, Y, and Z, and now I'm a master of my brief and I'm going to feel confident enough to do it. So everyone's on their own journey, which is great. So I don't think I was consciously aware of how it was going to take shape or how it was going to form. And ultimately, I didn't come up with the idea. But also it was James, my brother, that saw a competitor doing it badly. Well, it was a great idea. We thought, what a great idea. And then he saw the reaction from some of the the parents he watched for a little bit and made his own views on things and just kept quiet. So it wasn't me that came up with our current business idea at all. It was James.
Mm.
So the day that he sort of called and told me about it, it just so happened was literally the perfect time for me to take a leap of faith and go with it and say, right, I am going to quit my job. I'm going to move back in with mum and dad age 30, which is brilliant if you ever want to get a girlfriend, I'll tell you. And I want to go out on this journey. And I was very fortunate enough that all of the circumstances and situations were aligned. Mum and dad were very supportive in terms of they allowed me to live at home rent free because we weren't going to have any income for a long time. We had no idea if it was going to work. And I knew that I was very lucky, and not everyone has that luck, where I was able to say that if, I don't make any money for 6 months or 12 months, I'll still have a roof over my head. And I think that's something I'm very blessed and very grateful for.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that luxury. So it is there's all these little things that have to align, but it was just that James had the idea. He shared it with me, and I was at a point where I could leave a job, I could move in. And I felt that from the last sort of 10 years of working, that I had the drive, the skill set, and the ability to put the hours in, the effort in that was needed to make it work.
Nice. So it's like you're at that point where you were ready to build a business, and then the business opportunity presented itself, and you were good to go. So
yeah,
there's something I'm curious about here, because so you worked with James back in that when you did that record health club launch.
yeah.
And so I guess I'm curious about, and he obviously was one of the elder siblings who you were battling in the garden and things, right? So I'm curious about that dynamic, because I don't know if people say, but there's always this some kind of warnings about working with your family and things like that. So give us a sense of that journey, because I'm fascinated to know how you've navigated that. I'm sure there must be times when correct me if I'm wrong, but it must feel like there's times when you're back in the garden together, even though you're building this great business. It's still Harry and James, and you're kind of dueling in the back garden. So what's that journey been like, and what have you guys learned about how to really be successful in building a business together?
I think very fortunate that I love my younger sister, and I love my older brother, and both my brothers equally as much. But with James, I'm very fortunate that I trust him implicitly. So I think if you're starting a business together and you're looking to start with a family member, you do hear horror stories and you hear successes. So I was very fortunate that if you've got someone that you trust implicitly, that certainly helps. It was at a stage where I was the only one working full-time on the business, and James was still having to work as a national director of another sports business. So I really was just doing all the work day to day, and in the evening, James would have to give me a call, talk through what was going on, and then he'd have to put in extra hours or on top of an already challenging job. So he had a very patient and tolerant wife, and that's also a big part of it. Michelle, my wife, is incredibly patient with me and tolerant when we know we have to put in big hours.
Yeah.
And so through the journey, James was able to put in these extra hours and work in the evenings at overtime, really. And when the financials allowed us to, he was basically able to quit his job and come and work full time. Now that was a massive financial risk, a huge financial sacrifice for him and his wife. That's never an easy decision to make, and we had to take big pay cuts really to make that work. And when we started out, it was really challenging. I'm not going to lie, it was it was so difficult, because I was the one that had been working on the business day to day, and I knew it inside out, and it had been me really calling the shots and then making the day-to-day decisions. And James my brother had come from a sort of corporate environment where he was managing large volumes of people, had systems and processes in place. And I think we tried to incorporate it into our little business, and things were difficult. And I think if we talk about it a lot, it took a while for us to get our communication right. And we were very fortunate that we had a dad that was also a business partner with us, and he was able to kind of make sure that he could see both sides, remain impartial, and then give us advice about what was going on. And eventually we got there, but it took, I would say it probably took a good year or two before we got our communication right. And occasionally, even now we still have the occasional competitive stuff, but we both still had to James had to adapt his way to make sure that he could change from being a corporate director into a smaller business. And I had to accept that my little systems and processes weren't going to be good enough to scale to the level that we needed to go. So James needed to sort of adjust to the way I was doing things, and I had to adjust to allow new processes and systems in to make things better. And to communicate, that's difficult when you're not in the same office. So we definitely challenge, but the most important thing above all is that if you trust that person, then, and you know that you're both in it together, that you're both working towards the same objective clearly, and you both put in equal hours and you trust each other, then I think it all works out well.
And so I guess I'm feeling like there must have been a bit of kind of, for both of you at times, learning to leave your ego at the door. Like, you'd have been working on the business in the daytime, and I'm guessing there must have been times when James would have come in and been like, but like with this kind of, be able to see the bigger picture or whatever, why don't you just do it like that? And you're like, that's 10 hours I've been putting in, So was that something? And how was that process kind of, I feel like that must have been actually a great training for how the business has been successful now. Is like, one of the things I see is you're so approachable with the parents. Was that process of being able to kind of leave your ego behind something that you feel has been really beneficial?
So it's one of the most important things if you want to start a business, for sure. To remain humble, keep your feet on the ground, no matter how well you think you're doing. And the ability to take constructive criticism, not just people shouting nonsense at you, but from people that you admire, that you work with, or peers or family members who have got your best interests at heart. So not toxic people. You have to be really careful that you're listening to the right people, but your ability to put your ego aside and listen to ideas, solutions, debate problems, listen to all of the different possibilities, and then come to a conclusion sensibly together. Absolutely massive. And I think it is, I've been to a few, when we first started up, I had a few free training days with Google and Google experts and things like that, and web developers and things. And when you sit in a circle, and there's this chap here that had worked, was a Google sort of specialist, and he's got these incredible certificates and great reputation. And I sat around a table of business owners. There was about 12 of us, and he said, put his hands up and said, right, who would like me to go through their website and give you some advice? And I sort of went first. I said, absolutely, yeah. And he went through it, and he gave some really good sort of ideas and things. And he went through about 4 or 5 other people's, and everyone just went, I think you're wrong. Well, I think you're wrong. No, and they literally, this is an expert, he just couldn't stand the fact that their website wasn't right, that things weren't easy. He was trying to help them. And when you're trying to build a business, certainly with somebody else, you have to absolutely put your ego aside and admit that sometimes you are so wrong. You may think you are so right. And sometimes if you get 2 or 3 people involved and it's 3 or 2 against 1, sometimes it's really hard, but you do have to go, I am wrong. Yep. That's the way forward. And it does take time. It takes practice, but and I don't think, again, you ever master it. And sometimes when you're tired and cranky, it makes it even harder. But
I
definitely put your ego aside if you want to improve and learn in anything, let alone business.
And definitely out there at times. I have a tendency to love being right, and
don't we all?
But it actually reminds me, this aspect of our discussion reminds me of that. I love this actually parallel. I'd love your take on it. That part in that documentary, the Jordan documentary, where Phil Jackson comes in as the coach. And previously, the previous coach had designed all of the plays so that essentially he was feeding Michael Jordan. And Phil Jackson came in and implemented this structure where the team would be the ones achieving success. And the pivotal moment comes when Jordan buys into that philosophy. And so leaves his ego at the door, which is, as we see from the series, like massive. And he is so driven, and he's also so kind of self-confident. And that was kind of fascinating. Like, I hear in that journey for you and James, like almost James coming in as this Phil Jackson figure, like he's got these corporate ideas of how you could scale this to the next level. And for both of you, there's this adjustment period. And you've now kind of kicked on. You were putting in the hours. You were the Michael Jordan putting in the hours to get this organization to a point where it could scale. It was that X factor of someone else's additional skill set that has allowed you to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's a single, I'm not saying I'm particularly successful, but I don't think there's a single successful person on a global scale, the global superstars, business people, sports people, musicians, that would ever say that I got here on my own. No one would ever say that. And you have to have a really good support system around you. And I thought that part in the Jordan documentary was just so powerful. I think it's the best sports documentary of all time, on a side note. But I just felt that when he talked about that, and they suddenly realized that it worked for maybe 1 or 2 seasons. And then I think that happens in business. You have to adapt your systems and your processes in the same way that Jordan was just starting to get double, triple teamed, and there was no way he could do everything and play all 45 minutes and out of whatever minutes. He was just getting exhausted. He was getting overmarked. And yeah, definitely when our business was running with just me, I was doing everything. And then, yeah, James is sort of the CEO of our business, really. He is the one that looks at the overall strategy. I'm kind of the one that's the doer. I'm the sort of operations person. But you have to accept that you can't do everything. And you have to be able to step back and say, we need someone on a strategic level to be able, who's not day-to-day ground into the business or your team, to come in and take an overview and look at things from a different perspective and say, hey, bring these systems and processes and I promise you it will work. And you have to then trust it and go with it and see if it does work. And that's where Phil Jackson was just a genius, wasn't he, with his man management of that situation, handling a global rising superstar, and then bringing in Scottie Pippen and Kerr and then Rodman, and just bringing the right people to make the puzzle work. I thought was amazing. I loved it.
Absolutely. And for me, I'm just blown away at the being able to draw out these little similarities in your journey, in what you've been building with. And so that was one of the things that really kind of struck me. And for a while, I've had a feeling that there's something important about exploring the interrelationship of artists, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Because, all of them, it feels like, are having to, there's that 10,000 hours element of, really being able to master your craft of, understanding business in a deep way, in the same way you might understand why that player needs to be in that position on the football pitch, or why you don't actually add any more paint to this picture. That painting is done. You know what I mean? There is a mastery of craft that runs through all three of those. And so I've been really fascinated about, what could be the kind of commonalities of sport, or kind of athletic sport, entrepreneurship, and artistry in terms of drive as well. So, I'm so glad that we've both watched that documentary, which I would agree. I haven't finished yet. I think I'm 6 episodes in, and it is a masterful piece of work. And I just feel so grateful that this footage was taken and we get the chance to see this, that just has so many metaphors for how those of us who want to be of service, who want to bring teams together to do great things, have this example. So I want to come back to this idea of support. We spoke about Phil Jackson, like giving Dennis Rodman a holiday in the middle of the season, like just craziness, right? And you mentioned there that you were lucky enough, yourself and James, in building UK Football Trials, to have your dad as this other business partner who was able to kind of see both sides and give support and kind of almost like bring you guys to the best that you both could be. And I don't know if you're familiar with a book called Grit by Angela Duckworth, I believe her name is. And she kind of did some studies, worked with the Seattle Seahawks around, what is that quality that can define a player who kind of has both that drive, but also it's something a bit more. It's like a kind of, it's an inner steel that they will be knocked down, but they will not stay down, and she identified 2 key elements to it, which is kind of like, one is support and the other is like being pushed. And it's the balance of those two. So I guess I wonder, in your and James's upbringing, if those 2 elements, how you felt those 2 elements were present, because I really see that grit is present in both of you. What did that support look like, perhaps from your mum as well? And then how were you kind of pushed so that you got those 2 elements working correctly?
Yeah, the support element was, you do what you want to do when it comes to sport and all your interests. There was never there was never really a push from them in terms of when I was younger. I'd say that it's changed as I've got older. So I wouldn't say there's anything when in grit that sort of refers to much about my younger years. I would say, and I like that. It was nice. I was able to do what I wanted to do with sports and go for stuff and not leave stuff and take stuff up and then drop sports as and when I wanted. I wasn't really pushed in any way, shape, or form. But certainly in my later years, then definitely there's been a massive support element, and I think that comes in many different forms from. If you want me to talk about that side of it rather than my formative years, I think with grit and stuff, I think it comes from a sort of the support would be from not only business partners and people in your business, but it also comes from my wife. It also comes from friends and family and people like that. So I think there's a nice supportive element. I think it's very important with support to make sure that you are supported by the right people and you remove toxic people from your circle, from your life. I think I told you that I removed 1,000 people off Facebook when I started the business, which was one of the best things I ever did. I just stopped talking to a huge number of people that I usually used to speak to because I knew that they didn't have my best interests at heart, perhaps.
Yeah.
And with the pushing side of it, the people that are supportive also have to push you in the right way as well and give you a bit of a G up. And I think one thing that springs to mind with this would be acknowledgement and appreciation. Okay. So perhaps when I was growing up, I did feel like I was acknowledged and appreciated from mum and dad when I did something well. And it wasn't necessarily always based on the outcome. It was based on the effort that I put into something.
Nice. Okay.
I think when you talk about grit, drive, whatever you want to call it, for anything in life, people maybe succeed and fail based on the support that they get, yes, and that can come in the form of acknowledgement and appreciation. And I think so many people, unhappy staff members, people that perhaps fall into depression, fall into beliefs where they feel they can't do something, have usually not been supported. They've been downtrodden. They've perhaps had an idea. They've maybe loved something, and then somebody's come along. It can be the amazing thing with it, George, for me, is that I think it can be like a throwaway comment that someone makes that has a really deep impact. That the immediate moment you don't think much about, but actually in life you can be like, 20 years ago, someone said something that just crushed
100%
my dream on something.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where a lot of people's lack of drive comes from, because they maybe were supposed to go on their journey. Maybe their journey was that they were supposed to start a business or get involved with this or teach people that or set something up or work in industry. And they never felt acknowledged or appreciated with it. They got downtrodden from it. And they didn't have that support that this lady's clearly talking about in the book Grit. And I think you also do need to sometimes get to a stage where if you have that acknowledgement and appreciation, you do need someone to push you when the time's right. Definitely. And I think month 3 that we started UK football trials, there was a time where it was so tough. I think I was very, very close to quitting. I sat down, had a chat with James and Dad and said, I've worked so hard, and I think I had terrible cost control at the time. I think I went out and, bought beers at the hotel, was too generous with my money. And I think I came back, and after putting in all this work, I didn't see any immediate return. So the support was regarding, knowledge and appreciation, certainly pushing me into carrying on, which I think that's important. So acknowledgement and appreciation in amongst that support is key.
Nice. And I want to pick up on the little detail there that you added, which is that it wasn't always for the outcome, but it was for the effort.
Yeah.
And so, you got that praise and recognition, acknowledgement and appreciation for effort. And so you're much more likely then to want to put in that effort again. Like it's almost, it encodes you to be like, oh, effort. I receive an emotional reward for effort, not for achievement. And that's, the Carol Dweck and the growth mindset stuff, you're there, it's there in your story. I really love that. And it's something I've really kind of worked on with my children is like, both Freya and Rafi, they know that, like, if you want to get better at something, you practice it. And it's just a thing I've constantly kind of kept going with them. And like even tonight, so I said I was doing this radio show, this podcast, and it was going to be going out to maybe anyone in the world. And Freya's like, oh, but don't you get scared or nervous? And I'm like, no, because I've practiced. And she was getting scared about doing a show with her animals to show to me and my partner. And I said, well, look, this is just practice. you know, in time, you could be dancing on a stage in front of lots of people if you wanted to be. Start with this little bit to practice. And she goes, oh, but I think I'm still scared. Then tonight, asking me, she goes, oh, I see. So you practiced with mummy and daddy, with grandma and grandpa before. And I was like, yes. And so now I'm ready to do with maybe anyone in the world. And so it was just wonderful to see that little penny drop that, oh, if I keep practicing this. So really, really great to kind of have that point brought out in this conversation. So grateful.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is important, definitely, in kids bringing them up. Not that I'm a parent or anything yet, but I think you certainly see it around other parents, perhaps. And you can't always control the outcome. So whilst you want it to be, you know, whilst you always want to win, while you always want it to be great, sometimes kids love doing stuff and they're no good at it, but they absolutely love doing it. And you've got to give them that well done for, you know, creating this rubbish piece of work, but it's amazing. You know, how many times do you see friends that have pinned up all the pictures up on the fridge, you know, and the kids think it's the absolutely incredible work of art and it's just a load of blobs, but tried hard, they've put the effort in and everything else. I suppose it's a bit like me now making a cake, George. You know, I'd really try hard, but the outcome would be appalling. But there we go.
Well, I think you need to get used to how much butter and sugar goes into it. That was
crazy.
Cool. So let's kind of bring this into now. So you've talked about kind of some of the early years of UK football trials. Give us a sense of where the business is now. You know, perhaps where was it just before COVID? Like, you know, it felt like you'd really built it up to a point where, you know, in our language, you were the key people of influence in that realm. You were getting the opportunities coming to you. So what did you build it up to, and how have you now had to call on your drive, call on your grit in this time of COVID?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting time. Obviously, as an events business, we've been absolutely hammered, I think, as well as millions and millions of businesses and industries. It's been an extremely challenging time for anyone that owns a business, I think. And so this isn't a sob story just for us. It's a difficult time for many, many people, but it's the first time ever we've not wanted to really sort of sell events for the future, because we're wanting to make sure that we can fulfill some of the events, obviously, that people have already paid for, that we've had to postpone because of the virus, which has been odd. And one of the things that we've all had to do, perhaps, is turn our drive from what you would call a warrior mentality, where you are going at 1,000,000 miles an hour trying to get as much work done as possible, to a drive where you stop, sit in silence, think more and more, and have deeper reflections and set a brand new course. And with a small business, it's much easier to do that. You can pivot quite quickly. Whilst you can't change your core offering, you can certainly have a think about, again, what you can do, not what you can't do. And so for us, we had a long think, and we decided that there's a system that we've had on the back burner for a while that you were involved with as well, which was the Improve My Football series. And we thought, what can we do to add value and help our players around the world? So we've got over 200,000 now, 200,000 footballers in about 150 countries. And we thought, everyone's in a lockdown situation probably. So what can we do to serve? And we focused on that. So we came up with 10 hours of video content, which included drills, skills, and really we've interviewed scouts about what they look for in players, and to try and provide as much footage as possible and information to make it affordable and easy to access for people so they can improve and learn at home during this lockdown period. So we built that, and this pandemic has forced us to do that. It's something that we probably wouldn't have really had the time to do. And from there, we're going to launch a book, which is probably close to being sort of finished as well. So that's going to be our best knowledge of what we believe it takes to get scouted and how to improve as a player. And it's all positive stuff as well, which makes it enjoyable to do and useful, hopefully, for the planet. And on top of that, we've got another sort of business opportunity that we're sort of working on, sort of related to what we're currently doing, which we're going to sort of hopefully finish towards the end of sort of August as well. So it's this pandemic. Yeah, we can't run football events, which is our core offering.
Yeah.
So we've had to definitely pivot, think a bit, and our drivers really change from, like I say, going 1,000,000 miles an hour, getting everything done, to really thinking and focusing, and then delivering great quality work in key moments, like for 10-minute videos and things. So I suppose that's where our drive has maybe changed its form in these last months.
Nice. I hear that you've. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like, if someone had 5 hours to chop down a tree, they'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. And so I kind of hear that previously you were just like hacking at the tree and being successful, right? You chop some trees down, and and I can confirm, you've got. How many countries have you delivered your camps in now?
I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, I think now. But we get around. We look at about 5,500 players a year, and they come from around 55, 60 different countries to us, which is great.
Wow. So you've been doing, and you've been really serving in that doing, but now you've had to, your events were the thing, and now it's like, well, if we're going to create something that is going to last for and be of value, it needs to be the right thing. So you've had to really refine almost your approach. And so what I'd love to hear is, you've spoken to me, on a personal level before about this kind of meditation practice that you have. And for those who are maybe listening to this and going, well, yeah, that really rings true for me. I've had to totally rethink how I've done. I'm doing what I'm doing. What has been your practice to support that shifting of your drive, that shifting of your perspective to how you serve?
In terms of different daily practices with deep thinking and things like that.
Yeah, you mentioned the meditation thing, but I'm not sure I've ever actually kind of quizzed you on what that looks like for you.
So certainly try to get out and get down to the sea as much as possible, which is not too far from where I live, clear my head. Right. I read a book called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma.
Okay.
It talks about what happens to your body when you first wake up, which was really interesting. I finished it a couple of days ago. And they say that if you wake up early in the morning, you can make massive gains. Your body's full of certain chemicals when you first wake up. So you need to counteract it by doing sort of 20 minutes of exercise. Then you should be doing 20 minutes of constructive reading or learning of some sort, and then 20 minutes of sort of deep meditation. And he calls it the 20-20-20 model, I think.
Right.
And I found that really useful. It's been good. Whilst I haven't been getting up at 5 a.m., I'll be honest, it's certainly the meditation side of it has always been something I try and do as much as I can. I really would like to do it every single day, but I don't, being honest. But when I have questions around where we're going, particularly in these last few months, I always use meditation to try and get some answers. I ask questions, but I always listen hard as well. I think I don't want to go into a meditation with in my opinion, with a sort of set agenda of what you want the outcome to be. And it was quite funny. I went down to the beach at sunset, and I sort of looked out to the horizon, and I said in my head, I was sort of like saying, "Come on, give me something now. Give me something. Come on, give me a thought. Give me something." And all I got in my head was, "You've got your sob story. Crack on." And I thought, oh, that was not very sort of standing or particularly kind, but all I got in my head was, "You've got your sob story. Now crack on." It's like, this is your, the business has been really, really impacted, and now just get on with it. But honestly, over the years, I've always found that if I've been umming or ahhing about something, it's something that a few of us in the business do. We sort of, whilst we don't sort of have a particular religion, we just believe that there's a greater force of some kind. And I certainly think through meditation, if you tap into it and ask a question, sometimes you'll be amazed by the answers that you get. And without question, whatever answer we've got and we've gone with has always seemed to work out for the best. So I think our minds are so busy at the moment with social media and screens and overthinking things. And I do hope that from the end of this pandemic, the world comes out of it a little bit more rested, a little bit sort of slowed the pace down a bit. And perhaps this sort of time has enabled people to have some reflective thoughts on what we're all doing, what our purpose is, and what we're trying to do to help, and what we can do again. So yeah, meditation's been really, really useful. It's a practice that I'll use probably on, I'd say, two or three times a week.
Nice.
Certainly when we've really got important questions to be answered, I'll always listen and always trust it as well.
Nice. So that's wonderful to hear that you've not kind of gone out there and read, here's my meditation books. Like you've got a thing that works for you, and you trust it. And and I think I'd really second that, because for me, The one that works for me really well is journaling. And I pumps up, you're like, you journal every day. And no, I don't. But there are some times when if I feel just like, it's like I feel clogged. There's so much going on. It's almost like if you think of a river and there's a load of logs just jammed up. Just journaling, something like it would be just like suddenly that thing that all of this stuff's been building towards. There's the clarity. So for those listening or watching, I hope you take from our shared examples that are very different. That actually some kind of contemplative practice for you that works for you, that is your choice. If you want to go and listen to some geezer telling you how to do it, great. But actually, trust what works for you, because as you hear from Harry, you hear from myself, it tends to work out.
There's many different forms to it, isn't there, as well? I think the initial thing that springs to mind with meditation is you sit there cross-legged with your fingers like this. And some people do it like that, and they say there's many different ways that you can do meditation. And some people, I think, just get it going for a walk. Some people will get it from answers, or it's a meditative practice from just listening to music. Some people will get it by training. Some people go to the gym for their sort of, they call it almost a meditative practice, lifting weights. And for some people, so it is very, very personal, I think. Whatever works for you, brilliant. There's no right or wrong, and each to their own.
Nice. So I guess the thing I'd like to explore before we wrap up is speaking to you now as someone who has, over the last 5 years, you've probably seen 30,000 odd footballers, right? Or there or thereabouts. We're certainly talking the tens of thousands. Okay, and so what have you seen? There's a few things we've covered so far. We've looked at like the support, how well you were supported, by your folks. Okay, and those you've learned to get the right support for you. I'm sure you see some of your younger players who aren't getting the right support. Okay, and you've probably seen some players who are struggling and others who perhaps have got everything and still are kicking on and doing what needs to be done. So I guess I'd love to just speak to you now as someone who has seen so many aspiring young footballers. And if you could, do your best to sum up what you think are some of the key ingredients that set the successful, or the ones who you feel will be successful, aside. And the whole picture, like what does the parental background look like, as much as you can know it? And what are the players themselves doing to perhaps put them in that position to succeed?
Parental side of it varies dramatically and wildly, because ultimately the person that has to perform on the day or on the pitch is the player, not the parent.
Right.
And I think you get a mix of some parents who are fantastic, really supportive. You get some parents that you hear horror stories about on the sidelines. And I'm sure if you go to any grassroots sort of festival or school game, you get a lot of parents who think they've won the World Cup and they're experts giving advice and things. So I think there's a big mix, but ultimately they just need to be supportive, in my opinion. If they aren't supportive, then there needs to be a coach. And usually, I think the English FA has got so many coaches organised, there's loads of volunteers. I think the football industry's in Britain's fantastic with regards to the number of people that are wanting to go and help local teams and everything else. So if it doesn't have to be a parent or a guardian that supports a player, it can be a great mentor, like a local coach or a school teacher or a PE teacher that has a lot of contact time with the player. So I do think absolutely there needs to be a supportive element, but not necessarily from parent or guardian. Then I would say the three main elements, and we get asked this all the time, and I think we could probably talk all day about what they look for in players and what makes a great player. But to make it simple, let's talk about 3 A's. Right. We talk about attitude, athleticism, and ability. Okay. So attitude, certainly one of the most important things. Ability, obviously, someone has to be technically absolutely outstanding, both technical, tactical side of it. Then the physical side of it, things like their speed, agility, fitness, and everything else. And then the attitude side of it is important. And that, while some players will have all of the skills and ability, if their attitude is poor, or the manager can't work with them, they aren't coachable players, they don't want to listen, they don't want to work hard, bad body language, disruptive, then managers nowadays have got so many players they can pick from that they can really get rid of those players. And it's a real shame, because there's a lot of players that probably would have made it but just didn't have the right attitude. And when you get to players that are superstars, it's slightly different. And you don't want everyone to be all vanilla attitudes. You want everyone to be different. You need some characters to make the dressing room fun and the trips away and everything else. But certainly you've got to have an attitude where you're a nice human being, work hard, you listen to the manager and you respect them, good with your teammates, great leaders and communicators are so important.
Mm.
And then, so that's the attitude one. The athleticism, again, comes down to how fit people are, because ultimately the fitness levels of pro athletes is, I think, beyond what some people could imagine, how fit and strong they are and how much work they put into it. So they do obviously do the speed testing, the fitness testing, agility times, then I'll do the strength testing, fat testing, all that type of thing. And then the final part is the actual playing ability, which comes down to a million different things based on obviously which position you play in. But the scouts are really clever. They know all of this stuff in the top of their head. Some people can tell in 5 or 10 minutes how good a player is.
Yep.
Ambassador that scouted Wayne Bridge, was actually just looking. I think he was actually out looking for maybe a different player, or he was there watching somebody else and then saw Wayne Bridge playing and saw something in him straight away, and obviously the rest is history. So you do hear stories of players getting scouted anywhere. So the other thing is being in the luck of being in the right place at the right time. You need to be having a great game when someone is watching, and it does change you.
Yeah, nice. And I absolutely remember that blew me away when we first landed to do the first camp in Australia, and Pete just looks across and says, "That one." As he sees one of the players warming up, turned out that was the best player by quite a country mile of the entire group, and he spotted him within literally 2 minutes of watching him warm up. So and that's that's another thing. Is just, we talk about this being a master of your craft. Some of these scouts have seen thousands of hours of football players playing football, and so they really straight away. It's
again, it's a skill. It's the same as anything else. They are absolutely. One guy that we work with, I think he had 45 signed players at Chelsea and 15 at Arsenal, and he's now just gone to Tottenham. But he just stands there. He just watches players and you chat to him. He's an older chap, and just unbelievable knowledge of the game. And all of our coaches that we work with, from our sort of head coach all the way through to our supported coaches and our ambassador, when you pick their brains on the game, it's just unbelievable what they know. Things that you stare at and you see something and they see something completely different about why it was good or bad is such great fun to learn from them. I love it.
Nice. Fantastic. So let's kind of, I reckon we've done our duty here. If this is part one of an investigation, I feel like we've really pulled on some great strings. We've looked at how siblings could be an element in sparking this drive alive in someone. We've spoken a bit about struggle and your own overcoming kind of the injury. We've spoken about the importance of support and how actually that can really nurture drive to take hold in a person. And we've spoken about that why, having that kind of almost like that guiding star that can give you that reason, like Mo Salah, to travel on 6-hour bus journeys to go training and things. So, I feel like it's brought a few elements that I hadn't considered. So I'm really grateful we've spent time together. So for you now, as you come out the other side of, we hope that the lockdown will be finishing fairly soon. As you come out the other side and you look into the coming years, where do you see yourself applying your drive going forward?
I think there's always improvements to be made on the businesses that we've got at the moment, and that's great fun. I think first of all, I'm just looking forward to seeing all of our team again and everyone going back to the office. I think that's the first and foremost. I'm hoping everyone's safe and well and all okay. That's the first thing. I think our focus is going to be on looking at what we're still currently doing and looking to make those sort of 1% changes, which I think is crucially important. There's obviously great books and people that we know like Clive Woodward and Dave Brailsford who are obsessed with these tiny little changes that make a big difference in a cumulative sense. And I think again, we're going to go with the flow until things settle down. So I don't think we know exactly how things will pan out over the next few months. We're going to do our best to try and ride this out, and then we feel that we've got a good video series now which will help a lot of players, and a lot of people have bought it, which is great, and had great feedback from that. I hope our book will always serve as an ongoing resource for people, which definitely is constructive, will definitely help young players. So that's something we're looking forward to putting out into the universe to hopefully do some good. And yeah, then doing our best to try and make our service offerings as good as can possibly be. And then you never know what opportunities pop up with regards to collaborations and people coming in, and that's where you just have to trust that it's all playing out as it's supposed to be.
Nice, beautiful. Well, brother, I want to give you so much kudos and appreciation. You spoke about acknowledgement and appreciation, and I want to acknowledge the efforts that you have made, and acknowledge that you're one of the reasons why we're sitting here having this conversation. Why I may be working at Falmouth at the moment. You said those kind of throwaway comments sometimes can either crush a person or they can build a person up as well. And I remember when I first landed in Cornwall, you said, I think you're going to really have an impact in education. And here I am working in a university. So that comment stayed with me because in the same way that you trust James, implicitly I trust you. You've always had my best interests at heart. And I know your heart. You're here to be a servant. You're here to make the world a better place. And so I really appreciate that. I appreciate the way you've built the business. And for those, I got the pleasure of working kind of alongside Harry for, 18 months or so, seeing firsthand what goes into building a business like UK Football Trials. And I saw the honesty, the ethics, the transparency. And, I appreciate that because it really inspired me. And, I've not been shy of mentioning you on the podcast because you are, for me, you're one of these people who has been modeling how I believe entrepreneurship should be done going forward. So I really appreciate and acknowledge you for that.
Thank you very much. That's very kind words, George. And thank you for having me on here again, and hope it's been useful. Sorry for my waffling and my ums and all that stuff, but hopefully people got something from it. And if not, then hey, good luck to them, and I'll try my best.
Well, we're all masters of the I was listening to one of my early shows the other day, and I was like, oh my God. It took me about 3 minutes to actually say something of any kind of value. So, and
it's not easy like this, is it? It's not easy, but you try your best. You do your best.
Well, I hope that you get back in the office with the team soon, and when you do, I shall certainly be knocking on the door for a cuppa to say hello. And it's been really wonderful spending the evening with you. And love to Michelle, love to the rest of your family, to any of them who've been watching this. Look after your brother, and he's a special one. Look after your son, and thank you, Harry, for spending time with us. And I wish you every success going forward.
Thank you very much, and to you, George. Good luck with everything. I'm enjoying all your shows every week. Keep it up. Great stuff. See you soon, buddy. Take care.